Today we're going to talk about the poem Daddy by Sylvia Plath. And I just wanted to mention that when we refer to a poem, we put it in an inverted comma. And you'll notice I've got the title of the collected works, the text that it comes from is called Ariel, and that's why we underline that, because that's the complete text. So the inverted comma basically means this is one small component of the larger text. And that's just the convention we use. Now, when we look at the poem Daddy, we can look at it on two levels. There's the literal level, and then there's a deeper metaphorical level, which is very common in poetry. So on the literal level, Daddy is Otto, her father. She's writing a poem to her dead father, or about her dead father. And basically what occurs is that the technique she's using is called apostrophe. And that's where the poet addresses the dead, and she's talking directly to Daddy. The poem begins, "You do not do." She's talking directly to him. And the reason why is that she's doing that is because Otto dies, her father dies when she's very young, and she's left with all these unresolved issues, and the influence that he's had on her still bears impact on her, when she's 30 years old. So really what she's doing in the poem is she is expressing her unresolved issues with her father. Okay, and it said that he had an oppressive manner in which he was raising her, but also she's exploring this notion of his death. It came too early, and so she didn't get to know him, and there are lots of things that are unresolved that way. So as she was growing and moving through her formative years, there were lots of issues that were sort of revolved around her relationship with her father and the fact that he died when she was so young. Okay, and we get that notion at the end of the poem where she says, "Daddy, Daddy, you bastard, I'm through." Okay, now what we have here is, she's basically saying at the end of the poem, I'm over it. She's pretty much saying, I'm moving on. That's one way we can look at it. And what she does in the poem is she presents it in a sense of childlike innocence. So there's an allusion to the nursery rhyme, "There was an old lady who lived in the shoe." And what Plath does is she uses assonance, all those ooh sounds, you, shoe, achu, through. There are lots and lots. When you go through the poem, you'll notice that, and that creates the rhythm that sort of makes us feel like it has that nursery rhyme sort of notion to it, and so that's showing her, her childhood, childish, innocent perspective, and all the way through, we're sort of feeling as though it's the inner child speaking, until we get to the very end of the poem, which is normal in poetry, where she uses the term bastard, which really seems out of place in the sense that it's written from a perspective of innocence, but now we have a contrast, so it's showing, that maybe she is moving on, she's resolving those issues. And that's essentially the essence of the poem. She's expressing that she's tried to discover who he was, and searched all these towns where he may have grown up, but the name's very common and she can't trace that. So there's all these things, these uncertainties and doubts that are hanging over her, and so what she's doing at the end of the poem is letting them go. So we can look at it in that respect. We can also say, well, she's writing and saying, I'm through, I've had enough, and then we see that she does commit suicide. She had previously attempted suicide as well, so maybe this is her means of saying, I've had enough and it's over as well. Now, on a deeper level, so we've been looking at the literal level, and we were saying in the earlier tutorial that the poetry is bigger than the personal. So we have to look at the broader more universal ideas that are being presented. And so some of the things that she does is she talks about, her father is a representative of all men and of the patriarchal order. And so it's really looking at that power relationship, and she's making a commentary that she's over the patriarchal system. The tongue stuck in my jaw shows that she feels silenced, and so there is a power relationship, and the patriarchal society having that male dominance really is her expressing that there should be parity between gender, and so there's an expression. It's quite an angry tone in the poem, and so she's expressing her anger and frustration and saying, it's time for change, and that's reflected in what's going on in the 1960s. The rise of the feminist movement. We see the rejection of things like protests towards the Vietnam War a little bit later, because people are saying men as leaders are making these decisions, and they're not thinking about humanity. They've got the capitalist sort of notion, or this notion of power really at the forefront. So certainly there's this feeling of she's been silenced for so long. It's like she's been treated as a child. That females are treated as children in the power sort of ratio, and she's speaking out and protesting against that. She also says, sort of halfway through the poem, she starts making Holocaust references, and she says, "I may be a bit of a Jew," and really she's saying that she feels imprisoned, that she's powerless, and that she's held prisoner to the patriarchal society. So patriarchy and power is a really prominent idea that she is exploring in this poem. And then, 3/4 of the way through the poem, she starts talking about the photo. She's got a photo of her father, and she says, "A cleft in your chin." So she's talking, and she's basically making an allusion to the devil and saying that her father, but really not really her father. Well, yeah, her father, but certainly male dominance, and the patriarchy is representative of the devil. And so in biblical stories, goats had cloven feet, the hoof, and that was a reflection of the devil. And she's saying that you've got a cleft in your chin instead of your foot. So it's quite a strong attack on masculinity and patriarchal order. So then from that point she moves on, and she talks about the vampire, and that you're a vampire, and you drank my blood for a year, and then she says, well, for 7 years if you want to know, Daddy. And she drives a stake through his heart. So she's killing off the vampire that is patriarchy. Okay, so when we look at this poem, we can see the bigger issue is really it's about power, and it's about it's a reference to, or her poem is really addressing patriarchal society, addressing patriarchy, and she's saying, I'm through. It's time for change, and she's moving from childlike innocence to a more mature sort of picture. The presence is far more mature, and so we can look at this poem and say, well, the poem is about oppression, and it's about persecution and victimization within the realm of the patriarchal society, and looking at that power relationship. But really, what she's doing at the end of the poem, saying, Daddy, Daddy, you bastard, I'm through, and she's killing off the patriarchy. So really, it's a poem about rebellion, and it's about freedom. She's freeing not only herself, but her gender from this society and the imbalance in society. So it's quite interesting, you know, she on a literal level is killing off her father's influence, the memory that lingers, you know, the influence that he has on her personal psyche and life. But really what she's doing is she's killing off the influence of the patriarchy, and that's really reflective of the feminist movement that was making inroads at the time.